Most people move through life with an invisible weight on their backs. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention. It simply sits there, shaping every decision, every dream, and every fear. It is the quiet belief that somehow they are not enough. No matter what they accomplish, no matter how many victories they collect, something remains unsettled deep inside. They tell themselves that the next achievement, the next improvement, the next success will finally be enough to silence the voice. But it never works. The dissatisfaction only deepens. The bar moves higher. The emptiness grows heavier. Carl Jung spent his life trying to understand this hidden suffering. He saw that this feeling is not a personal weakness. It is the natural outcome of a life shaped by forces we never fully understood. Our families, our cultures, our societies taught us early on that being ourselves was not sufficient. We had to become someone else, someone better, someone more acceptable. In the process, we lost touch with the very thing we needed most, a deep, unwavering connection to our own authentic self. Today, we are not here to blame ourselves for this loss. We are here to understand it, because only by seeing the roots of this pain can we begin the long, slow work of healing. Only by making the unconscious conscious, as Jung said, can we stop calling our suffering fate. There was a time when you existed without doubt. In the earliest moments of your life, you simply were. You did not wonder whether you were worthy. You did not calculate your value based on the reactions of others. You laughed when you were joyful. You cried when you were in pain. You reached out for connection without hesitation. In those first pure experiences of life, there was no question of enoughness. You were existence itself, alive and whole. But slowly, almost invisibly, the world around you began to shape your sense of self. Approval and disapproval became signals, teaching you which parts of yourself were acceptable and which were dangerous. A smile from a parent when you behaved well, a frown when you cried too loudly, a subtle withdrawal when you expressed anger. These small reactions left deep marks on your young, unguarded mind. Without words, you began to understand that to be loved, you had to edit yourself. Certain emotions had to be hidden. Certain desires had to be muted. Certain truths about who you were had to be buried. Jung described this process as the birth of the persona, the mask we create to survive in a world that demands certain performances. The persona is not evil. It serves a purpose. It allows us to belong, to function, to find our place in society. But when the persona becomes the only self we recognize, we begin to forget who we truly are. Beneath the mask, a growing shadow forms. The parts of ourselves we exiled because we were told, directly or indirectly, that they were unacceptable. The feeling of not being good enough is the echo of this original loss. It is the silent grief of having abandoned parts of your soul for the sake of survival. It is not a flaw to feel this way. It is not evidence of your inadequacy. It is the natural outcome of a life lived too far from the truth of who you are. As you moved further into the world, The mask you created became heavier, but you learned to wear it well. Society praised you for it. Good grades, good manners, visible success, these became the currencies of worth. And slowly, quietly, the idea took root that if you could just perfect the mask enough, you would finally be whole. If you could just become the ideal version of yourself, polished, impressive, beyond reproach, the aching sense of deficiency would disappear. But Jung understood that ideals, when disconnected from the reality of the soul, become forms of tyranny. They are illusions that seduce us with promises of salvation, but ultimately deepen our suffering. The more you strive to embody an ideal self, the more fragmented you become. The authentic parts of you, the ones that do not fit the image, are forced even deeper into the unconscious, feeding the shadow that waits beneath the surface. You chase perfection, but perfection is a moving target. You achieve what you thought would satisfy you, only to find the hunger untouched. You reach a milestone and realize it is not enough. You refine your mask again and again, always hoping this time it will be sufficient. But the soul does not mistake decoration for nourishment. It knows when it has been abandoned. It cries out in subtle ways: anxiety, numbness, self-sabotage, depression. Signals not of weakness, but of life demanding to be lived differently. The ideal self you have been chasing is a ghost. It was never real. It was stitched together from the expectations of parents, teachers, peers, and strangers. It was assembled from advertisements, social pressures, and silent comparisons. It is an abstract figure you were told to worship without ever questioning whether it deserved your devotion. True healing begins when you recognize the idol for what it is, a false god that cannot save you, and find the courage to step off the altar you have been sacrificing yourself on for far too long. Facing the emptiness within you is not an act of failure. It is an act of extraordinary bravery. Most people spend their entire lives running from it, seeking distractions, comforts, and victories that will keep them from having to hear the sound of their own forgotten selves crying out for attention. But there comes a point when the chase becomes more exhausting than the fear, when the noise of the world is no longer enough to drown out the truth inside you. This is the moment Jung spoke of, the beginning of individuation, the slow and painful process of becoming whole by reclaiming what you have abandoned. It requires a descent, not an ascent. You must turn inward, stepping down into the basement of your own psyche where the shadow lives, where the anger you were told was unacceptable still burns, where the grief you were told to hide still weeps, where the wildness you were told to tame still waits for you to set it free. The shadow is not evil. It is not your enemy. It is made of the parts of yourself you cast away in exchange for approval. It is built from the strengths you suppressed because they frightened others, the passions you denied because they did not fit the image, the dreams you silenced because they seemed too dangerous. To meet the shadow is not to destroy it. It is to listen. It is to allow the disowned parts of you to speak again, to show you the life you might have lived if you had not been so afraid. It is to retrieve the vitality, the creativity, the rawness of being that you sacrificed in order to fit into a world too narrow to hold the fullness of who you are. Individuation is not comfortable. It strips away illusions, dismantles false identities, and demands the abandonment of all the comforting lies you have told yourself. But what it gives in return is worth everything it takes, a life that belongs to you, fully and unmistakably. As you walk the long road of reclaiming yourself, there will be days when you wonder if the struggle is worth it. There will be moments when the temptation to put the mask back on, to chase the approval of the world, feels almost overwhelming. But if you persist, if you continue to choose truth over performance, something beautiful begins to happen. The feeling of not being good enough does not vanish overnight. It softens, it loosens its grip. You begin to notice it for what it is. Not a fact about yourself, but a story you inherited. A story you are no longer required to believe. You realize that you do not have to earn your place in existence. You never did. You realize that your value is not measured by how others see you, or by how flawlessly you perform the role you were given. You realize that the parts of you that once made you feel ashamed, your vulnerability, your tenderness, your anger, your sadness, are not liabilities. They are signs that you are still alive. They are proof that despite everything, your soul endured. Carl Jung understood that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal. Wholeness means embracing all that you are, the light and the dark, the strengths and the wounds, the beauty and the brokenness. It means living not from a place of trying to be enough, but from the quiet, knowing that you always were. You were enough before you achieved anything. You were enough before you disappointed anyone. You were enough before you even understood what enoughness was supposed to mean. Healing is not a destination. It is a homecoming. It is the long and patient return to the truth you were born with, and somehow, along the way, forgot. Maybe the reason you never felt good enough is not because you were lacking, but because you were listening to the wrong voices. Maybe it was never your soul that doubted its worth, but the world that taught you to doubt it. You were born whole, not flawless, not finished, but whole. Somewhere along the way, you forgot. You traded truth for approval. You traded presence for performance. You traded your being for becoming. But none of those trades were final. They can be undone, not by chasing something new, not by building higher masks, but by remembering what you already are. Healing is not about rising above yourself. It's about sinking back into yourself, deeper, quieter, truer. Maybe today is not about becoming better. Maybe today is about beginning the long journey home. The journey back to the self that was never missing. The self that even now waits for you, not with judgment, but with open arms. If this journey resonated with you, and you want to walk further into the deeper questions, consider subscribing. There is more ahead, more reflections, more explorations, more returns to what was never truly lost. Thank you for being here.